Hello folks, welcome to Legacy IS Academy. In this video we will be discussing analysis on NATO's legacy of conflict and controversy. See, recently in Washington your NATO celebrated 75th year, but the mainstream media was not very interested in so-called achievements of NATO. For example, it was the 25th year of your Yugoslavia. None of this were mentioned by mainstream media because what your NATO wants to perceive, or what your NATO wants people to perceive NATO does, is to provide peace. But in reality, it has been very far-fetched from calling it as a global peace plan, or it is there to provide peace to the people. But it is rather more about trying to showcase its expansionism and supremacy, or otherwise the West and allies supremacy. Now, if you're someone who likes to know about your local news, international news, geopolitical news, or national news, with regard to any of this, then subscribe to Legacy IS Academy because in Legacy IS Academy, we offer a detailed analysis into these topics. Alright, so let's get into the topic of NATO, that is North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Now, this North Atlantic Treaty Organization, so called, was created in the year 1949. Now, let's break it down and talk about it like a story only. The whole point, 1949, if you see, it is post your Second World War. Second World War started in 1939, ended in 1945. Even though there were threats of Japan attacking Pearl Harbor and all those continuous things were going on, and yet despite it ended with your worse fate to your humanity or mankind with respect to your atomic bomb droppings. Further, what happened? Your West and its allies formed one of the most controversial and criticized. Okay, I am telling controversial and criticized is how it is perceived right now. But back then, what your West and allies created was the so-called NATO in 1949 with the objective, it had a simple objective at least on paper, collective defense and global peace. Now, when I tell collective defense, you attack one, you attack all. Understanding? And this NATO was spearheaded by your USA. So, your NATO is West plus allies or US plus allies. Understanding? Let's say, why did they in fact start this thing called as NATO in 1949? See, the story again begins and dates back to your Second Cold War era only. Yes, Second World War ended in 1945. But what began after the Second World War was your beginning of Cold War era. And your West and its allies, US and its allies, wanted to curb and contain your spread of Soviets. Understanding? In the stark reality, what we see, yes, on paper it is for collective defense and global peace. Collective defense against whom? The Soviets. Understanding? Today, if you see your NATO, it is trying to, now we will be seeing the course of history of what your NATO's works are, where one side all the citizens who have been helped, the civilians who have been helped by the works of NATO, and on another side the wars that has been fought, the conflicts that has been fought, all the hasty decisions that have been done, the amount of bombing that has been done, and all for your West and its allies to maintain its hegemony over the world. Yes, so when this is the scenario, today, including the mainstream media as well as the common people, do not view NATO as let's say a global peace platform, but rather as the military platform trying to safeguard the interests of your allies and West. If you see about your NATO's legacy that we spoke about, continuously when we tell, it is something that is in fact delineating or moving away from your peace process. One of the main reasons we are telling that is because its constant interventions and blatant disregard for international law. What do I mean by blatant disregard for international law? For example, many times it has intervened into other sovereigns without even your UN approval. That is, without your United Nations approval, they have entered in as an intervention in order to showcase their supremacy and hegemony. But at the end of the day, who is getting affected means it is the civilians. Understanding? So, during the Cold War era led to the formation of your NATO, and this was to mainly contain your Soviet let's say rise or influence. What is the core principle underlining your NATO is an attack on one is an attack on all. Understanding? So, NATO membership becomes very important. Now, especially from the ongoing Russia-Ukraine perspective, which we will discuss in detail a little bit later in the video, the main thing started is with Europe's ambition of trying to bring NATO to the backyards of your Soviet, that is your present day Russia. Okay. Now, coming back, let's see about the evolution of NATO's role. First and foremost, your NATO was like, it told if anyone attacks us, we all will collectively defend. So, the keyword here would be something about defending themselves. It went on from defending itself to constant intervention in regard to others or other sovereign countries' relations. As of now, if you see the perception of NATO, it is rather seen as a global war machine than any sort of peacekeeper. Understanding? Now we will see a list of what is NATO's record of interventions that it has followed. Now, first and foremost is your Yugoslavia. See, when I say Yugoslavia, this story starts in around 1999. Before that, I told you your NATO was celebrating the recently 75th year anniversary, right? The mainstream media barely acknowledged this and barely acknowledged even the 25th anniversary of NATO's intervention in Yugoslavia. Understanding? Because they find this as a glaring failure of war-oriented alliance. So in here there was a lot of ethnic conflicts already going on. Alongside that, there was a huge race for your separationism in Kosovo. Your NATO enters into your Yugoslavia as an interventionist and launched a 78-day bombing campaign. Now, when it entered into this excessive bombing, it started attacking civilians, children, infrastructure. Now, whenever a war happens, we all know that yes, there will be indirect losses. In Yugoslavia, the bombing was so intense that it led to direct economic losses because it hit almost all of your economic infrastructures, coupled with your huge amount of human right violation. When I tell human right violation, it is because 22 kilotons of bombs were dropped, and most of these is with your depleted uranium bombs, which caused instant death of more than 2.5 thousand civilians, with 79 plus being your children's, and this created more than 1 million people were displaced. Further down, because of using of all these depleted uranium bombs, what happened in the next upcoming years, that is in the next upcoming years, people suffered a lot of issues with regard to your cancers, health issues. Understanding? Their one reckless move has affected generations that came after your 1999 decade. Children born after 1999 started suffering due to that. Understanding? And your NATO did this with clear violation of your UN Charter and Vienna Convention. Understanding? This is how it took forward the so-called peace that it was going to follow, was followed in this way with regarding to your Yugoslavia. Now the next is your Bosnia and Herzegovina. See, first I'll tell you this background wherein from April 1992 to December 1995, the war was in Bosnia and Herzegovina. This erupted among mainly your three ethnic tribes. Okay, what was the issue between the ethnic tribes over where who will get what positions and the territorial divisions, right? So, three ethnic tribes in Bosnia and Herzegovina were deciding on their future and territorial divisions. Before the outbreak of the war in Bosnia, NATO hastily recognized Bosnia and Herzegovina's independence. Now what will happen because of this? This became huge amount of ethnic conflict got exaggerated. And to deal with this situation, NATO launched extensive airstrikes against the Bosnian Serbs. Specific targeting was there, so as to make sure eventually all the three ethnic groups were forced to sign a framework of agreement for peace in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Now, this whatever happening, it more and more accelerated the situation that was already on ground. So much so that more than 278,000 civilians were killed. 2 plus more people became refugees and they became displaced. Economic losses were mounting to the pressure, more than $5 billion of economic. Yes, they forced them to sign the framework of your peace agreement, but at what cost did it happen? At a severe humanitarian violation that happened? Yes or no? Then next in the same period of time is your Kosovo war. In this, your NATO acted again without UN authorization. Understanding? This led to the casualties which mounted about to more than 2,000 civilian deaths and 6,000 injuries and direct economic losses of 150 billion. One important thing about your Kosovo is, up until now what your NATO kept claiming itself as it's a defending position and it is against collective defense, now got converted into an offensive war. That is, it moved from your defense position to expansionist interventionism. When we started the video, we said what started as defend then went on to attack. That phase starts from your Kosovo war. Understanding? Now this is, when we tell an offensive war, your NATO entered into an offensive war or strike capabilities with another sovereign state. Understanding? If you see the clear objective here, which is underlying the naked truth, what we would call it, is to establish and strengthen your position of your NATO. Understanding? And next is your NATO's role in Afghanistan. It was a huge blunder is what we would tell. Why is it a huge blunder? First and foremost, they started from your 2001 decade and continued up to 2021. What happened? First and foremost, your US and its allies wanted to make sure that your Al-Qaeda is punished severely and send a clear message out to the world as to what will happen if you carry out terror attacks in US soil. So, this specifically was launched, this offensive strike was launched against Afghanistan in the aftermath of your 9/11 attacks, and this was launched specifically to target your Al-Qaeda. This was a very costly war. Engagement with Afghanistan proved very costly because it was a 2-decade war. Now, when you enter in with your shiny gloomy words claiming that we are here to bring peace, we will end all the other issues that are happening, we will end the amount of casualties that is mounting up, and abruptly 2021 Donald Trump made the announcement that they are exiting from Afghanistan. It was a very chaotic withdrawal because the amount of difficulty that Afghanistan had to go through, because there is a political vacuum now. And there are other your organizations which have formed up and they have been taking up, your Taliban coming into power, before that other sections which claim to bring peace to the civilians, and yet again no sort of peace, but only in the fear, constant fear people had to live. So much so that in your Afghanistan, in totally 241,000 people were killed. And especially with the evacuation, that is your hasty evacuation without a formal plan, they were spending in a very costly war which used to take around 45 million per day spending on the war. More than 72% of the people were living below the poverty lines, and recently a UNICEF report published that 3.5 million children are out of school, which means they are not allowed to take up the education system. 24% of the Afghan children are facing anxiety because of the war-torn situation, and more than 15% of the people are living in depression. All this is because of what? Your NATO's intervention. Now, before we move ahead, if you are someone who is interested in kickstarting your UPSC civil service journey, then look no further. You have found the right spot with Legacy IAS Academy. Why do I tell it is the right spot? Because we at Legacy IAS Academy maintain our batch size to a strict limit of 40 members. Why? So as to provide you with personalized coaching and attention. Our next batches are starting from 16th October. This is your weekday batch, and your weekend batches are starting from your 4th and 25th October. Now enroll fast because the seats are getting filled up sooner. Why should you opt Legacy IAS Academy? First and foremost, we provide one-on-one mentorship, easy access to the educator, daily mains answer writing challenge, your comprehensive current affairs, CSAT classes. Alongside this, prelims mock test series, interview mock test panels, all of these are given. Now, if you are someone who is a working professional or a student, you can avail our classes in the weekend batches. Now, for those of you who want to see as to how the classes are, you can schedule a demo class either online or offline. For more information regarding Legacy IAS Academy, the fee structure, etc., you can call the number given, or you can check out the Legacy IAS Academy website. Alright, now let's get back to the video. Your NATO's intervention did not stop at that position. It entered into your Iraq and Libya. When I tell it entered into Iraq and Libya, one of the key prime things that we have to discuss is the fact that how it was trying to remove, or let's say whatever or whoever undermines the position and power of NATO has to be ripped. Meaning what? The hasty hanging of Saddam Hussein in Iraq was your Western backed. And also with respect to intervention in Libya, NATO led strikes caused the death of your Gaddafi in Libya, which is very often quoted with respect to your association of what the statement at that point of time Secretary of State Hillary Clinton made. She said, "We came, we saw, he died." Because of this, the place was left war-torn. It was huge amount of instability, a rise of alternate factions of terrorism. The state concept collapsed. The power vacuum was tried to be filled by different sections. Because of the terror organizations outfits started. Understanding? Now apart from this, if you see, has NATO stopped it? No, in fact NATO has increased these things. How? The present Ukraine scenario is the live example, where the conflict started in 2022 and it is still ongoing in 2025. First and foremost, your issue starts with Ukraine wanting NATO membership, which means you go to the backyard of Russia with NATO in order to contain Russia. See, its objective is simple: contain Russia, make sure provoke China in order to have conflicts in the eastern countries. Okay. Now, if you see with respect to, let's say, Ukraine scenario only, I will take this. One of the main things, let's say, as the conflict keeps on dragging on, NATO members are also facing the escalating costs and inflations. While Ukraine is depleting its fighting age soldiers, because again anything has a limit, right? Western leaders are also very much invested in this Russia-Ukraine conflict. Why? Because it will do two things. A, it will reduce the power of Russia. It will contain its powers. B, it will make sure that China, which will not be a threat to the global dominance, and it will be occupied in fighting with its neighbors. So they want to hit two birds with one stone. Understanding? Now, if you see, yes, constantly things are going on where your Russia-Ukraine war has been going on and on, where Ukraine has started targeting Russian ships, energy depots, and also your border regions. And how is it targeting? With drones. Understanding? When Ukraine is doing this, Russia's aggression has also increased. Understanding? Where they have, let's say, with respect to your Kiev, Donetsk, Luhansk, all this region we see are the key places where Russia is also equally taking back the territories. One thing that comes into picture here is your NATO now, as of now, is realizing one thing: either it overestimated Ukraine's ability to take over or limit Russia's positioning. Second thing is, it undermined your Russia's defense position. See, we know for a fact that Russia is not USSR or what once the glory it has, but it still has enough power. It is giving equal defense, but no one here, either your Ukraine or Russia, has got any military success significantly claiming that yes, this is going to end the war. So much so that your US President Joe Biden, while during a presidential debate, he was the one who had even suggested for expanding more support to your Ukraine. So your Western allies, the NATO, now if you see, they can enter into direct offensive with Russia, like how they have entered into the previous conflicts. Understanding? But here one issue is, the civilians are not on terms with opening of NATO into Russia. Understanding? So they are trying to do it with its proxy of Ukraine. Understanding? So this miscalculation is costing your NATO, that Russia's resilience can be undermined, and Ukraine, when we flood Ukraine with good amount of weapons, we will be able to win over. So if you see the current position of Ukraine, Russia has made limited territorial gains with respect to Kharkiv, Donetsk and all, but Ukraine is also struggling with your shortages of manpower. Coupled with this, your NATO members are also facing inflation, debt, and constantly public support is also getting reduced. Understanding? Alongside this, what your NATO wanted to do, like I told you, hit two birds with one stone, destabilize Russia, engage China with local conflict, has led to in fact creation of your BRICS alliances. When they try to meddle so much in the eastern countries' affairs, they put up a coalition to fight up with your NATO, that is your BRICS. Today your Donald Trump is telling he will levy 100% tariffs for de-dollarization. Understanding? And now more, your Russia, despite this much amount of sanction, is still trying to continue because of its major trade with India and China. Now your BRICS is trying to be seen as a counterweight to NATO. This is not a thing that NATO had picturized would happen. Alongside that, now your buffer states are also being created in the region, that is in your Asia Pacific region. That is your Japan, South Korea, Australia, New Zealand, all are being drawn closer to your NATO membership. Now, what are the legal and ethical concerns if we start seeing? One of the main things is your NATO's blatant disregard for your UN. Understanding? Many a times it violates or even bypasses your UN Security Council. Your UN Charter has been violated many a times, especially when they employ force without even authorization. Their hasty reactions and actions has led to huge civilian casualties in all the interventions. Now we have seen a list of the things, right? In where exactly did we not see civilian casualty? And also, when members such as your Bosnia and all wanted to file a lawsuit against your NATO alliance, your NATO has claimed that it has immunity from your lawsuits, especially because huge amount of their bombing, especially with your depleted uranium, has led to cancer. The entire generation faces the struggle because of the actions of your NATO. So where exactly is the peace is coming here? So now this brings us to a very important question. Can powerful alliances be held accountable under international law? This is very apt with respect to your NATO and your let's say with respect to UNSC or even your UN Charter. If you see NATO's global impact, what has the impact of your NATO's actions? It has led to an expansion of terrorism. That is, post your NATO wars, wherever, now for example, Afghanistan, it comes, it does a 2 decades wars, instantly it goes back hastily. What it does? Political vacuum. Leads to lot of factions trying to fill that power. Your Al-Qaeda, ISIS, EDIM, all of these are the leftover parts which are trying to fill the vacuum. Again, it leads to what? Human right violations. And also it leads to lot of regional destabilization, which is ranging from West Asia to your South Asia. Your NATO is one particular organization which has not shied away in showing what it is. That is what we see with respect to its alliances. Yes, one side it is NATO trying to destabilize your eastern part, and in why? In order to expose, that is in order to showcase its hegemony and supremacy. But in turn it has created counter alliances such as your BRICS with member countries of Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. Your Asia and especially Asian countries have been telling that, see, first and foremost with respect to your Russia and Ukraine war itself, let them resolve this issue within themselves. If not, let us all mediate the negotiations. First thing is, get your Russia and Ukraine to the negotiation table. Let's avoid external interference. For example, US President was also, your Donald Trump has also tried a lot to bring them to negotiation table. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Chinese President Xi Jinping, all have spoken about negotiation. Now, if you see what is India's position with regard to NATO, India is not a NATO member. It maintains its strategic autonomy. When we say it maintains its strategic autonomy, it is also a member of BRICS, also a member of Quad, Asia Pacific Alliance. In any of these conflicts, especially taking the recent one in picture of Russia and Ukraine, it advocates for dialogue and peaceful settlement. Another thing is, it is concerned about NATO's constant extremism. When I tell extremism, expansionism. Okay. So in conclusion, if you see NATO's 75-year story, what it wants to project as is, it is a guardian of peace. But what it is seen, especially in all the recent intervention, is as a war machine. Understanding? A global war machine. So now in this topic, what kind of possible questions can come to the mains? Examine the implications of NATO's interventions on international law and civilian protection. Okay. With this, we have come to the end of the content. If you like our content, subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, share it along with your friends. Thank you.